Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on up here. It's going to be 80 degrees today. Hopefully, it's going to be beautiful down where you are. So we'll try to keep this as short, sweet, and beautiful as possible. So welcome to Defending Your Business Against Financial Loss. Today, we're going to identify some common spoofs, which are fake websites, fake things they claim they are, but they aren't, scams, and how you can prevent future issues. This is a presentation by the Maine Small Business Development Center at Northern Maine Development Commission. So today I'm thankful to be joined by my partner in crime, Dan Umphrey. Dan's the SBDC business advisor for Aroostook County. He's been there a couple of years now and been a great addition to our team. He brings a legal background and really understands fraud, understands how to prevent it, understands how you can prevent a lot of major issues. My name is Brandon McDonald. I'm the hub coordinator at NMDC. In a past life, I was with the SBDC for a couple of years. So this really is one of my favorite things to do is join you guys for presenting and trying to help businesses throughout Maine. And moving on, so today's goals, we're going to examine and identify some spoof emails, fake websites. We want to verify the legitimacy of those contacts. Make sure you're actually talking to who you think you are. We're going to get some basic cybersecurity literacy skills, how you can prevent those, obvious cybersecurity threats from happening. We want to identify a remote access scam. And what do you do if you fall victim to some kind of cyber attack or ransom attack? And we will talk a little bit about creating your emergency cybersecurity plan. That is, what is in your cyber toolkit to make sure that you can stay safe and minimize your losses and minimize any destruction to your business. So moving on, first order of business is talking about spoofs. And I love using the spoof email that I get. And this is an email from back in 2020. I get them every single month. And really, it's a subject that usually has a little bit of poor grammar in it. It's got a fake email. I like looking at the really dead giveaways in this, which are those red arrows. They'll send it at strange hours, usually outside of work hours. Our boss is an overachiever, but that doesn't mean he's getting up at the butt crack of dawn to send out an email at 5:30. Usually they say something fast. Do this quickly. I need this right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about this feeling of fear and dread a little bit later, because it actually hits close to home, because some businesses were recently attacked by people that talked about, how fast you need to do things. Usually there's a too good to be true headline if it's a business. So if there's something too good to be true, maybe giving away something, maybe talking about an individual coming into the community that normally isn't there, usually a shady link. If you're supposed to be on Google, but really you're at, geocities.com or, facebook.com/whatever, maybe it's not what you were necessarily hoping to get. Unfortunately, for those today who did see this website, we're not giving away free ponies with attendance to the workshop. I apologize. You guys can talk to Dan. He can find someone to represent you in the lawsuit. We'll make sure you get your money's worth with us. So again, usually spoofing is easy to fall for. It's simple to spot, but it's more dangerous than ever because most of us are working remotely. We do a lot more emails, a lot more online communication. The big thing about spoofs and scams in general is it deals in untraceable currencies, right? I'm not going to have you send me a check or give me cash. You're probably going to buy a gift card. You're going to buy Bitcoin. You're going to buy a cryptocurrency. You're going to go to a gas station, go to a machine, get a receipt, and show me what is on that receipt. It's usually done in this untraceable form just because of that main reason. They don't want you to know who they are. Versant, your banks, anyone is not going to ask you to send payment in a untraceable currency, right? You're not going to be asked to send a gift card or Bitcoin to keep your electricity on. Same way, Microsoft, the IRS, your banks, none of these folks are really going to email you and call you first and ask you for personal identification. Sometimes you'll get a call from your bank, maybe a fraud prevention team, that's not going to ask you for things like your account number outright or your social security number. And when something seems like it's a little bit off and you get your spidey sense triggered, call them, hang up, call them. And that doesn't mean just because your bank calls you and it seems like it's from your bank's number that it is your bank. I hate to be this guy that is just in fear of everything. but it's so easy nowadays just to spoof a phone number. I can pretend I'm you, and you won't know until you call back and find out, no, we don't have a so-and-so working here. So again, if you ever feel uncomfortable with the situation, hang up, call directly, even if that phone call seemed like it came from the direct number. So moving on. So when you verify legitimacy, like we talked about, nobody's going to ask you for that bank information via phone if they call you first. And the big one is we see a lot of businesses get threatened with things like an electricity shutoff, jail time, a business license being revoked if they don't comply with an order. That is so it just doesn't happen. Even with the IRS, with the Maine Revenue Services, they're actually very pleasant. It's so interesting how many folks are very pleasant from the Revenue Service side when they call you first, and they're not going to ask you some of these wild questions. So again, when you're a little bit confused and concerned, hang up, call them right back. What's tough is years ago, it was easier to find these canned responses with customer support, because when a fake customer call center, these scam call centers would call, they'd have canned responses. Unfortunately, we're in an era now of AI call centers, and both legitimate and scam businesses are using AI with canned responses. So sometimes it's tougher to say, oh, geez, they're giving me a very, generic response. But sometimes what helps is you'll get an out-of-state zip code. So Bangor Savings Bank probably is going to call from within the state, or maybe an 800 number. And if they're calling with an 868 area code or 808 out of Hawaii, okay, maybe I need to make sure that this is who they say they are. Another one is the email domain. Make sure that if you're getting an email domain from Versant, you're getting an email message, that it's at Versant, or if you're getting Gmail, it's at Google. But don't, send back in personally identifiable information if they're outside of your email domain. A lot of our email services really will say right there, this individual is outside of your domain. Be cautious of any information you send them. But I know my dad and a lot of folks used Yahoo Mail up until the end, and Hotmail, and those don't have those modern fail-safe mechanisms in them. So just use your best wits with you. And usually any kind of fraud is going to have that feeling of immediate action. So just, hold off. If you feel panic, move on. When in doubt, hang up and call directly. All right, sorry. Next one. So password strength has become such a big piece of the puzzle, and it's not necessarily about having the most complex password, but using a different password. The toughest thing, and I'll show a little website at the end, but really, if your bank password is the same, no matter how complex it is, can be 80 characters, if it's the same as your Facebook password and your Facebook password gets leaked, you really are going to be in trouble unless you're utilizing two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Most of us use this now. Most of our banks require it. That really could just be your fingerprint, your face, maybe a little key fob, maybe a USB drive you put in your computer. But really, the password is something and the two-factor is something you are or something you have. And so I can know your password, but unless I hold your fingerprint, your key fob, your USB, it really limits my ability to get into your account. So there's been a lot of these tests using the password Ducky, DUCKY, and as long as there's a fingerprint attached, you're going to get a lot of notifications someone tried to access your account, but it's going to be very hard for them to actually get into your account. Not impossible, but you've made it significantly tougher, which is a great thing to do in password strength. And we'll talk a little bit later on why it's important to have different passwords as much as a complex password. Next slide, please. One of the big things that we've been seeing, especially in the small business world, is ransom attacks. So ransom attacks typically are caused when you click maybe an unsafe link, you open a malicious file. It used to be EXE files. Now you can just open a PDF, open an Excel file. Excel files are actually the big ones now. When you open an Excel, it runs something called a macro. We saw one the other day on a very popular Maine tourist blog. They actually have you hold Windows R and then paste something that was copied into your browser. You press enter, and all of a sudden somebody has access to your computer. They run things in the back of your computer. You won't know that there's what's called a keylogger, or basically something that tracks your keystrokes. So it's common now to be afraid more than ever of all these random shortcuts we use, Windows R, Control V to paste. If you're not choosing to do this yourself, don't do any of these shortcuts unless you know exactly what you're doing. So a website spoof is very easy to fix. It's when you go to a website and it pretends to be something that's not, or it says your computer has been locked. Typically, you reset your computer, it goes away. An embedded virus is a lot scarier because that's actually locked onto your computer. Those are typically really something only an IT professional can fix. So when you know that you've reset your computer and you still see a ransom screen or a lock screen, you have to call a professional at that point. You can usually prevent these by using a stronger, modern email server, something like a Windows Outlook, maybe Gmail, maybe a very specific email server for your needs. You'll update your browsers and your operating system for security patches. I believe, oh geez, Dan, is it Windows 8 or 10? It's one of those Windows. They've become outdated. It's going to be, I think now, October and November. Yep. And now you're going to have to really move to the newest operating system to have those security patches. Hackers are really innovative folks. They want to change and innovate to make sure that they can breach those security issues. So if you're getting that notification from Windows that your operating system is outdated and you're using, your computer for business, you really should be updating to the most recent operating system. You should be utilizing antivirus and firewall software. In the SBDC and in my world, we really don't like giving, single recommendations, but if you reach out to the SBDC, we probably can give you a couple recommendations of options out there. Windows itself has some good embedded software. Just most people turn it off because it's annoying. I get it. But the only thing more annoying than having to, click OK on these, are you sure you want to open this up screens, is that ransomware attack that locks you out of your computer. And again, don't click those unsafe or unknown links until you verify it's a legitimate link. Next slide, please. This one we use a lot, especially in the lending world, in any world that has what's called PII, or personally identifiable information. Use a data backup. Have an external hard drive that you don't connect to your computer, or third-party cloud backups from a really trusted source in the event that you're compromised. If you back up your files regularly, or you set your system to automatically back them up on a schedule, it's even better. It's important to have this so you can prevent any losses due to common hardware defects, failures, crashes. I mean, even outside of cybersecurity issues, it's just great practice to have what's called an archive or a backup server. If you do anything in medical, you're probably mandated to do this anyway. But for those of you who do, usually my big one is CAD, right? Artists, folks who do CAD drawings, people who do anything that involves technology, drafters, engineers, any of that work, you really don't want to lose it. Imagine how many hours it's going to take you to get back that work compared to just that 1 hour a week, just to back up all your stuff onto a server or hardware, that hard drive. Just go for it. Set up a data breach plan as well. A data breach plan is what happens if your employees are impacted by a cyber attack. Some of you probably have employees. If you have employees and let's say your employee clicks a link, they come to you and say, I got a pop-up on my computer. It's not going away. Something's wrong. What is your data breach plan? What happens to your data? How do you lock down your data? How do you shut off any of your Wi-Fi or computer systems? And if this all seems like it's way above your pay grade, and I know a lot of folks are like, this is just way too much for me to be thinking about, consider looking at an outsourced IT professional, somebody either local, there's some national firms, but look at somebody who really understands how to protect you if these data breaches happen, because this is usually where the first failure goes. Is you can be as safe as you want, but if your employee clicks a link, if your employee downloads something to your server, what do you do to minimize your losses? So next slide, please. One of my favorite pieces of advice to give out is when you feel like you're on a fake website, you don't know for sure, but you got just this gut feeling something's off. Use the wrong password on purpose. If it allows you to go somewhere else or refreshes the page and doesn't tell you that the web or the password was wrong, you just submitted your password to basically a form. A Google form can masquerade as a fake website. Banks usually have a lot of these fake websites lying around. Katahdin Trust, County Federal Credit Union, Key Bank, Bangor Savings. They all get impacted by these websites that pretend to be them. Sometimes you'll, type in Bangor Savings Banac.org instead of bank, and you'll go to this fake page that asks you to submit. Looks like the real thing. Put your fake password in. I always do it when I feel like something's off. If it, refreshes the page, I know I did the right thing. It was a fake website. But if it tells you you have the wrong password, you might be on the right website. Never use that two-factor authentication code, which also could be your fingerprint or a cell phone code, a 6-digit code, 8-digit code that goes to your cell phone, other than the website it's generated for. Obviously, don't send it to someone on Facebook or Messenger or any kind of texting. Don't let someone you don't trust visit websites or other sensitive locations on your computer or your Wi-Fi without you monitoring them. This is where it's really tough, is when you have a guest Wi-Fi, make sure you don't host your pertinent files on that Wi-Fi. If you're opening up, I know a lot of salons, a lot of services love giving out free Wi-Fi to folks because it's a great benefit. Have a separate Wi-Fi. This is where a guest Wi-Fi is really beneficial. Don't store any of your personally identifiable files on that guest Wi-Fi. Where people probably could still access your personal Wi-Fi from the guest, it's a lot tougher. This is a big one. TeamViewer, GoToAssist, and remote viewing software. We see it all the time, especially with older generations that usually will get a Microsoft, maybe an upgrade message, say, contact us utilizing TeamViewer. You'll let someone on your computer and all of a sudden they can make some malicious things happen. I've seen people change websites to make your bank balances look bigger than they are. So they ask you to send a refund back to them. That's the most common one, is they'll have you log into your bank, inflate your balance just so you can see it. It's just a website little change they can make on the coding. And then all of a sudden you're like, geez, I got $10,000. I guess I'll give you $5,000 back. TeamViewer, GoToAssist, remote viewing software, unless it's somebody you really trust, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's the IT service that you work with, really don't use that with anyone. Banking, they won't ask you to use TeamViewer. Most good services out there, unless they're your IT person, they're not going to be asking you to use these. Just don't use them. Next one. This one bummed me out. So Uncle Henry's, you guys might remember Uncle Henry's, the buy, swap, sell guide. So they had a website. They were shut down for one whole month because of a ransom attack earlier this year. Up to 1 million people were impacted by June cyber attacks on a lot of New England hospitals, including Maine Health. About 1,000 Maine businesses were targeted with fraudulent electricity disconnection scams. Basically, someone called, pretended to be Versant, said, I'm shutting your electricity off today. I got a crew on the way. The only way I can stop it is if you go get me a Google Play gift card. While 1,000 businesses were targeted, we actually heard of about 10 in Aroostook County that actually fell victim to this scam. It's common. You sit there, you get filled with fear, and you say, I'm running my lunch shift right now. I absolutely cannot shut things down. You can't shut my electricity off. I'll go get you whatever you need, and you'll make a run across the street and go get them some gift cards. It's wild how often that stuff happens. Not just businesses are impacted, municipalities get impacted a lot. When municipalities get impacted, sometimes your identification gets leaked. And this is the same whether it's a municipality or a website that you use. LinkedIn, Facebook, MySpace, they've all been targeted. They've all been breached before. And when you use the same password on one of those websites, it gets leaked online, and all of a sudden, everybody knows your password to Facebook is the same one as your bank password. You just become easy pickings. The next slide. So this is my last slide for right now, but I wanted to give out a couple of resources that I love using. The FTC has a couple guides specifically, and I'll make sure I send these out after this. I know how much of a pain in the butt it is to try to type out these out. So I will send out a full PDF of this along with some of these links at the end. So the FTC puts out a PPI, a personal protecting your personal information guide. And they also put out a data breach guide for businesses, what to do if you're breached. This is great if you don't have the resources for an IT department or you just don't really think you have the capacity right now to take on a data breach. You can just adopt their guide. It's very simple. And then if you feel that you're falling victim to any issues, fake fraudulent bank websites, fake Microsoft websites, I would report those to FinCEN. That's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's kind of like your local police department, but only for cyber crimes. They take it pretty seriously. Usually they work with web domains. It's tough to actually go after these criminals. So instead, what they do is they go after the web domain that hosts it. So maybe Google gives them a website. FinCEN will go to Google and say, guys, you got to shut this down, cancel the credit card, ban them and blacklist them. You'd be surprised how well that works because there's really only, I call them the big three or the big four of web domains. If you get kicked off the big three, you have to start looking at going on a Russian web domain or a Chinese web domain. And usually browsers alert you of an unsafe website when you go through those domains. So it's just good to report any of these that you see. If you fall victim, also report it. It's a little tougher to get your money back if you've fallen victim. It's not impossible, but it does. It's a lot easier to prevent someone else from becoming a victim than it is for you to get your funding or your gift cards or whatever you've sent back. So with that, I am going to turn it over. I'm going to take my breath and I'm going to let Dan take over from here.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brandon. That was very informative, very scary also. And which you actually should be, because there's a lot out there a lot of nefarious actors out there that will take any opportunity to try to, invade your systems and see what they can get from your business. We live in a ever increasing digital age. We hear nothing but AI, things like that. So it's 20 years ago, this sort of webinar would be more of an advisory kind of thing. Like, look, this is some things you should be watching out for. In the age we live in, at this point, these are critical sorts of things that should, in my opinion, be a part of any sort of startup business plan. You should be thinking about these things. But, Brandon just sort of threw out a lot of different things, a lot of different ways that these actors can try to attack your business. So now what I'm going to talk about is, okay, now what do you do? Okay, how do you approach protecting your business's digital assets? How do you protect your own records, and how do you go about it? How do you start? Well, you start by first just assessing your business and taking stock or doing sort of an assessment of your business that basically just answers these questions that are on this slide. So, what you want to, before you go through this analysis, you want to sort of take stock, I guess, and inventory. Okay, what kinds of things do I have in my business that could be susceptible to these sorts of attacks? So you want to inventory all computers that you have, all laptops, mobile devices, flash drives, digital copiers. That's a big one. And everything else that your company uses to store sensitive information, which would also include filing cabinets. Let's also not forget about low tech sorts of things too. We still need to protect paper and physical types of things as well. So don't lose sight of that as well. But you want to ask yourself, okay, well, who's sending personal information to your business? Customers, obviously, if that's, if you're in a retail business or if you're, doing online sales, you're going to be getting customer data, sensitive customer data that needs to be protected. You're going to be, sharing information with credit card companies, with banks, with credit bureaus. it's a good idea to just sort of know is your business interacting with. How does your business receive personal information? You may get it through emails. You may get it fed to you through your company website. Say you have an e-commerce platform on your website. You can get it through regular mail. You can also receive personal information through your POS system, depending on what you use. And you want to ask yourself, what kind of information does your business collect? Is this the kind of information that's going to be tempting for hackers and would-be scammers? So we're talking credit card information and bank accounts, things like that. Where do you keep this information? Okay, do you have a central computer that you just store information right there on that computer? Or is it spread out amongst different laptops that maybe your employees and yourself use on a day-to-day basis? Or maybe you use a cloud computing service where all of the information is kept in the cloud. And finally, you want to know who has access to this information and how secure is it. Can all of your employees access it? If that's the case, do you need all employees to be able to access it? And again, how secure is that information? Brandon talked about, two-factor authentication. That's a real big, protective measure that we're seeing a lot right now. So you want to, ask yourself, okay, how easily could somebody just sit down at one of our computers and just access people's personal information? So this is more just sort of taking an assessment of how your business receives information, how it sends out information, and how you store it. You want to sort of answer those questions as sort of your first steps. So once you've identified all of your different, access points, the next step is to, scale down and only collect or retain information if there's a legitimate business need for that information, and keep it only as long as necessary. Okay. If you're just selling things and you're collecting credit card information, probably no reason for you to collect social security numbers. So if you don't need to collect it, don't collect it. And if you only need that information for a week, don't let it sit there in your records for longer than it needs to be. Okay. And, we'll talk a little bit more about creating sort of a plan going forward. And one of those things will be your data retention policy. And depending on what kind of business you are, will sort of determine how long you might need to keep sensitive information, on file. Social security numbers, obviously, we've touched upon that. If your business does have mobile apps or interacts with other mobile apps, you want to make sure that the app can only access the data that it really needs. Because if you do collect it, you do now have a duty to protect it. Credit card information is a big one. You don't want to keep customer information unless you really have a need for it. We're talking account numbers and expiration dates, things that if somebody had access to that, they could then use that information and, access that person's credit information and maybe even use their credit card. You don't want to be the reason why somebody's, credit card information got exposed. They're not going to be very happy with you. When it comes to employees, again, I've already mentioned this, but if you only really need one or two employees to have access to that information, then only have those employees be able to access it. Having employees that don't really need it to maintain access to sensitive information, it doesn't help you. It only sort of leaves a risk that information will either be inadvertently exposed, or worst case scenario, you have a disgruntled employee that decides they're going to, take it out on you. And probably one of the first things they're going to think of doing is exposing this kind of information and harming your business. So You really want to make sure only those employees that need to access the information have that authorization. And, again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, you want to develop a written records retention policy to identify what information has to be kept, and for that information, how to properly store it, how long you're going to keep it, and how you dispose of it. And depending on what kind of business you are, will determine, what sorts of things you need to have in that retention policy. If you don't know what that might be, my suggestion to you would be to get yourself a free business advisor, and he or she can help you through that process, or retain an IT professional if you feel you're going to be needing one of these policies, or you might as well just go ahead and retain an IT professional. I'll explain a little further how you can access a free business advisor though as well. That's always a good idea. So, once you've sort of scaled down, the different sorts of records that you keep, and managed who has access to it. Now comes the step of locking it down and protecting it. So you've also identified the different information systems that could be potential targets in your business. And again, you want to scale those systems down to collect and store only the necessary information that you're going to need. So there's a few different areas in addition to electronic security that you want to focus on. And first one is physical security. Okay, in this day and age, we're focusing mostly on cyber types of attacks, but don't lose sight of the fact that if you leave a piece of paper with somebody's information on it, that could be taken. That could be somebody could take a picture of it, post it. So you want to also be very careful about your paper records. You want to have sort of a policy in place, again, sort of that written retention policy that we're going to keep these paper records for a certain amount of time, and then we're going to shred them. And while we have them, we're going to secure them either in a locked filing cabinet, or otherwise maintain it so only those who are authorized can actually access it. So you want to sort of be careful what you leave lying around. You never know, somebody could break into your business and steal that information, and then you're in trouble. So don't lose sight of paper records and physical types of things that you also want to protect. Electronic security is obvious. We've been talking about that, this entire webinar, and Brandon sort of went through some of these different measures that you can take to enhance your electronic security. You first want to look at your own network. Create a separate network for guests so they can't access your main network. You want to have authentication measures in place. If you do have employees with laptops, make sure those laptops are up to date on their protective software, things like that. Firewalls are a good way to protect your business. Wireless access, again, that sort of goes into the network security. But remember that wireless access involves a lot of different kinds of things, not just computers, cell phones, iPads, things like that. There's a lot of different devices out there that have wireless capability. And if it has wireless capability, then basically that's sort of an avenue for, these would-be nefarious actors to access that device. And if you have sensitive information on that device, it's potentially, susceptible to attack. Again, digital copiers. Most digital copiers these days are hooked to the network. They're hooked to the internet. That means they're susceptible to being accessed. A lot of sensitive information might go through that copier or scanner. So you want to make sure that machine is kept up to date on all of its own security measures. Employees, you want to first be careful that you're not, perhaps hiring somebody that has a history of acting sort of untruthfully or uh, you know, their background suggests that they might be a security risk. So, you want to be careful when you're hiring employees and make sure you do background checks and do your due diligence. You want to make sure that your employees, if they're going to be looking at sensitive information, that they sign confidentiality agreements. You're going to want to have regular reminders to your staff, to your employees about, maybe new ways that hackers and scammers are trying to access systems. So, maybe a monthly meeting or something along those lines that just keeps this, fresh in their minds. And that sort of dovetails into just creating a security focused culture in your business. If you're walking by, employee's desk and you see, a piece of paper that's got somebody's information on it, remind them, hey, make sure that is properly stored. Just again, keeping these sorts of things in your employees' minds will keep them vigilant. And, they may not click on that, site that, you know, uh, results in ransomware if they're constantly sort of in the back of their mind thinking, okay, I need to be watchful for this. It can prevent those things from happening. And my own opinion when it comes to digital security, it's all in the prevention. You want to take every measure you can that's feasible to protect your business. Because if you do get attacked, a lot of times it can really harm your business, if not outrightly to closure. So taking these preventative steps is hugely important. And you can engage with professionals to help you do this. You also want to pay attention to the other businesses that you work with and that you contract with. If they're going to have access to your information or parts of it, what are their protection practices? Okay, you want to assess their data security of your service providers, and when you're contracting with different businesses, ask questions about their own security apparatus. There's nothing wrong with asking for their own policies and procedures for data protection. Yeah. Once you've sort of, uh, locked down things, you want to get rid of anything that you don't need or that's redundant. So you want to have, some disposal practices. Again, depending on what kind of business you are, what kind of records you're dealing with, you can sort of set, schedules and ways that, different kinds of information can be properly disposed. Obviously, when it comes to paper, you want to shred, anything that you do need to dispose of. You don't want to just crumple something up and throw it away because, again, these bad actors, they don't just use computers to access your information. They'll come in, they'll take your garbage and they'll go through it. And if they're able to piece things together, there you go. You've been breached. So having, just having a good shredder alone can prevent, something really bad from happening to your business. You know, you might have some older computers. We all do. You want to make sure that the software that's installed on those computers is up to date. If you have employees that work from home, you want to make sure that they're employing the same practices that you would have your employees who are working in office to follow. There are some types of businesses that are also subject to certain federal laws concerning disposal of records. If you're in one of these businesses, you're most likely already aware of what these requirements are. We're talking, banks, insurance companies, Anyone pulling credit reports are typically subject to the rules. So you definitely want to know if there are particular laws that apply to your business, and make sure that your own policies and procedures are consistent with those laws. Again, a business advisor can help you identify whether or not there are such laws in existence for your business. So, we've sort of gone through, how do you identify potential threats? How do you prepare your business? What sorts of things, do you have in place to ensure it doesn't happen? But let's say it does happen. What do you do? Well, you'll want to have, we've got here mobilize a breach, response team. That may be some of your employees and an IT professional. We don't all live in cities where we have access to different professionals. So, if you do live in rural areas, this is something you're going to want to start thinking about. Like, who do I, marshal if I ever did experience a breach? Because if you do get breached, one of the first things you need to do is stop the bleeding, right? Stop the breach, stop any further information from being disseminated out into the public. Again, at the bare minimum, you may want to look into having an IT consultant, or at least identify one so you know who to call if something like this happens. You want to move quickly and secure your own systems. You got to fix any vulnerabilities that could have led to the breach. Obviously, secure any physical areas so people who aren't authorized can't access computers, things like that. If possible, you want to assemble, some experts to help figure out what happened and what do we do. That can include, retaining a data forensics team, some IT personnel, and an attorney. And if you're thinking to yourself, like, holy cow, if something bad happens, I can't afford to hire all those people. That just means that it's that much more important to focus on the prevention aspects of this. Because it can be very expensive to try to dig yourself out from one of these scams. And if you're a small business who, doesn't have a lot of working capital reserves, this could be devastating to your business going forward. You want to remove any improperly exposed information that's on your website, that's in the cloud, or that's on any other websites. But don't destroy any evidence. You want to keep a record of everything that you do as you're responding to this breach and be above board about it. Document everything that you do. And like I said, don't destroy any evidence. You want to notify appropriate parties. And, first of all, if let's say a customer's social security number was, improperly released, one of the first people you should notify is that customer. Okay. If you wait a week to notify the customer, well, that may have left time for that person's identity be stolen. All sorts of bad things could happen. But if you notify the person right off, they can take steps to, set up blocks, basically mitigate any damages that could happen as a result of the breach. You want to know what your legal requirements are to notify parties. The state of Maine does have a law in place. At a minimum, if you think that personal information has been breached, you need to conduct a good faith and reasonable and prompt investigation to determine the likelihood that personal information has or will be misused, and give notice of a breach of the security of the system to that person. So it's actually in the law that you need to do a reasonable and prompt investigation and notify those that are affected. You're also going to want to, one of the first things you're going to want to do is notify law enforcement. Now, if you live, especially, Maine is mostly rural areas, uh, chances are your local police department is just not equipped to really investigate these kinds of things. So you do need to contact them. You need to create a record that you've reached out to law enforcement and made a report, but don't have lofty expectations that they're going to be able to come in and save the day. Probably the most thing that they're going to be able to do is just create a record of it. If it seems like your local law enforcement just really has no idea how to approach this, if you're in a really small town, you probably should also call your local FBI office and make a report as well. You want to also think about, were there any other businesses that could be affected by this breach? And if so, you want to notify those businesses and inform institutions, that are monitoring those breached accounts. If your business is in the healthcare field, then you've got to remember that your HIPAA requirements and adhere to those regulations. If we're dealing with social security numbers, you need to notify the credit bureaus, again, as well as the affected individual. Again, it's about mitigating the damages and stopping the bleeding. Obviously, you need to fix the vulnerabilities, fix the reason why you're in the position that you're in. And you want to assess your service or your contracted providers, because sometimes that might be where the breach happened. It may not be your business that was attacked. It may be your POS provider, that their system might have been attacked, and maybe that you were just down the line and you were also impacted. So the breach doesn't always happen with your business, but your business can still be greatly affected if one of the other businesses that you contract with has a breach. And don't be afraid to ask them for their data and their storage security practices. That's perfectly legitimate to ask those questions. Check your network segmentation, ensuring that if one segment gets breached, that it doesn't impact the other segments. You work with forensics experts. They may be the only folks who can really diagnose how your business was breached and can better prepare you going forward. Have a plan in place for communicating these different things, these various notifications that you're going to be responsible for. It's better to have that plan in place and just follow it if something like this happens, as opposed to try to, plan these things out on the fly. It just that doesn't work out very well. Again, the biggest takeaway I think we want you all to get from this is you want to really put the time in to prevent these things from happening, because that's really where you're going to save your business or not, frankly. So at this point, I'm going to turn things briefly back to Brandon. He's got this really cool system that you can use if you're not sure if you've been breached. So Brandon, why don't you explain what this service is about?
Yeah, so I've loved using this website for quite a while. It's basically tells you if you've been impacted by a data breach. Obviously, I wish I had an email as cool as the one in the example, but that actually is one of my earliest emails. I changed it, in Photoshop, but my earliest email from the 90s has been in 39 data breaches. The password that I put in, one of my oldest passwords, was used 530 times in other data breaches. And this website, I put it in the chat. You can scan it with your phone. If you don't want to put your password in, totally don't blame you. Instead, just put your email in. It will tell you exactly which websites were impacted by a breach that may have impacted your social security number. Not much we can do about that. A lot of folks out there have our socials. But really, the passwords, the addresses, it's really sad that as a society, we're now like, oh, geez, it's just a social security number. But I got to make sure my password is safe. But this is a great website. Really goes through some of both passwords. If you feel like you've got this, awesome solid password, it'll check it. It'll tell you if it's been breached. I tell people to do this a lot when they fight me on, password one exclamation point $sign is a good password, and they find out it's been used 25,000 times. Probably is not that great of a password after all. Email is the big one. Again, pop your email in, especially if it's an email you use for your bank. You don't have to put in anything other than your email. It'll tell you exactly which websites were impacted, and you'll be like, oh, geez, my Facebook password is my bank password. I really should change my bank password. It's a just really good resource to use. And I would say, Dan, beyond that, I guess the next one, it's the plug I love giving. I used to love it all the time. Please use your SBDC business advisor. Dan is the man. He is here to help you guys, SBDC in general. So loop up with the main SBDC website. You'll go to their website. You'll click I think it's still in the top right, the request advising button right at the top right. The advisors in the SBDC network, we are, I hate to brag about how great they are, but they are some of the best in the nation. I've worked with a lot of SBDC advisors outside the state, and I can tell you that the state of Maine's advisors really do. All of them do, but Maine's advisors just care just enough more for me to love, promoting them all the time. So, Dan, I'll let you take it away from there, but I have to give that plug. Use the SBDC. It's free. It's confidential. It's awesome.
Right. I appreciate the plug, Brandon. And as you said, we're free at no cost to you. We're all over the state, so wherever you're located, we can get you an advisor. We'll try to get you a better looking advisor than the one you're seeing on the screen now, but we'll do the best we can. But if you're interested in like I said, no cost, confidential business advising, please consider going to the main SBDC website and request advising. Takes about 5 minutes to register, and you'll likely be contacted by your advisor within 24 to 48 hours. We meet with people in person or by Zoom. It's whatever is most convenient for you. So an advisor can sort of help you navigate the different things that we've talked about here today, give you advice, and it's a really good resource to have. And I think I mentioned it's free, so take advantage of it. It's there for you. We really appreciate you joining us today. We've got a little bit of time here. If there are any questions, we're definitely open to it. We're going to send you the information that we've got on our slides here to you. So with that, again, we're very thankful that you took the time out to join us here today. And if you have any questions, fire away.
Not seeing any right now, but I think it's because we all want to go enjoy the weather today. I tell you, Dan, I don't know why we're cooped in the office. 80 degrees out. You kidding me? In October? Come on.
If you do have any questions, you probably saw my email on there. Feel free to fire any email questions at me. We'll do our best to get those answered. But with that, we'll wish you all a great rest of your afternoon, and hopefully you're taking advantage of the nice weather. Thank you all again for joining us. Really appreciate it.